Good day, everyone. Now we are down to the mechanics of coding. After selecting or devising an appropriate coding system, the researcher must determine how to go about coding the data. Implementations of systems vary among researchers according to personal preferences. Some researchers, for example, may prefer a system of using highlighting pens, working directly on transcripts, and making such things as syntactic errors in one color pen and lexical errors in another, with a tally on each page and a final tally on the first page of the transcript. Other researchers, depending on their particular questions, may decide to listen to tapes or watch videotapes without transcribing everything. They may simply mark coding sheets when the phenomena they are interested in occur, and may decide to transcribe only interesting examples for the discussions. This system may also be used for written data, for which coding sheets are marked directly without making up the original data. Still, other researchers may prefer to use computer programs to code if their research questions allow it. For example, if a researcher is interested in counting the number of words in different sections of an essay, or selecting the central portion of a transcript for analysis, it would be much easier to use a word processor than it would be to do this exercise by hand. If the research questions relate to computer-assisted language learning, many CALL programs automatically record each keystroke a learner makes, and these data can easily be sorted and coded. Likewise, if the researcher wishes to focus on such things as reaction time to certain presentations on a computer screen, or eye movements as learners read and write text, reaction time software would be a possible choice. After knowing the mechanics of data coding, the next question is how much to code? As suggested previously, not all research questions on coding systems require that an entire dataset be coded. When selecting and discussing the data to code, researchers first need to consider and justify why they are not coding all their data. A second important step is determining how much of data to code. This process is sometimes known as data sampling or data segmentation. Some researchers may decide it is important to code all of the data, whereas others may decide their questions can be answered by examining a portion of the data. In making decisions about how much and which portions of data to code, another point to consider is that the data to be analyzed must always be representative of the dataset as a whole and should also be appropriate for comparisons if these are being made. For example, if a researcher chooses to code the first 2 minutes of oral data from a communicative task carried out by one group of students and the last 2 minutes from another group of students, the data might not be comparable because the learners could be engaged in different sorts of speech, even though the overall task is the same. In the first 2 minutes, they might be identifying and negotiating the problem or activity, whereas in the final 2 minutes, they might be making choices about how to complete the activity or even how to communicate the outcomes to others. Other possibilities that the learners may begin to lose interest or feel fatigued by the end. In the view of these concerns, the researcher could instead choose to take the middle section of the data, for example, the central 50 exchanges. Whenever possible, if only a portion of the data is being coded, researchers should check that the portion of data is representative of the dataset as whole. Of course, as with everything else about research design, the research questions should ultimately drive the decisions made, and researchers need to specify principled reasons for selecting data to code. In much of Oliver's work, she has made a general practice of coding only the first 100 utterances of each of her extended interactions. For example, in Oliver, she coded the first 100 utterances for each teacher-fronted lesson and of each of the pair work tasks in her study. Oliver made this decision because, in some cases, the interactions were only a little more than 100 utterances, and she needed a minimum comparable number of units to code. In summary, depending on the research questions and the dataset, a number of different segmentation procedure may be appropriate in second language research. After knowing how much to code, now we're going to answer when to make coding decisions. Whenever possible, it is best to make decisions concerning how to code and how much to code prior to the data collection process. That is, when planning the study and preparing the protocol. After addressing coding concerns at the beginning, hopefully through a detailed pilot study, the actual collection of data can be fine-tuned. For instance, if straightforward coding sheets are designed ahead of time based on research questions and variables, it may become obvious that the proposed data collection procedures cannot provide clear answers to the research questions. This may lead researchers to rework their plans for gathering data so that they can gather more information or different types of information from other sources. The best way to uncover and address these issues is by carrying out an adequate pilot study. This will allow for piloting not only of materials and methods, but also of coding analysis. Designing coding sheets ahead of data collection and then testing them out in a pilot study is the most effective way to avoid potential problems with the data for the study. Data coding is one of the most time-consuming and painstaking aspects involved in carrying out a second language research project. There are many decisions to be made, and it is important to remember that many of the processes involved in data coding can be thought through ahead of time and then pilot tested. These include the preparation of raw data for coding, transcription, the modification of creation of appropriate coding systems, and the plan for determining reliability. Careful coding is a key component of good research. And that is all for my report.